Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the,
I don't know why.
Just give us 1 second here.
There is, now listen, there is no mute.
Do you mind helping?
Disconnect audio, okay. This should work, okay. We're good.
Okay. President Dwyer, thank you.
EID Take Two. I'd like to call the February 24th meeting of the El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors to order. Roll call, please.
Directors Penn, Mansfield, Dwyer, and Anzini present. Director Day is absent. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Board Clerk Sullivan present.
Thank you. Please stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Anzini. Any board comment on the agenda? Any public comment on the agenda?
If members of the board would like to, if members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's agenda, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda, moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. Communication.
Good morning. I have one recognition I'd like to share with the board. We received an email from Jim and Jean Shook, EID customers, praising the assistance provided by Glenn Gow, Dennis Johnson, Jorge Lopez, and Justin Stockwell, all construction and maintenance workers in our wastewater collection system. The customers indicated their appreciation, saying it was like the Marines landed. All pleasant, all jumping into the situation very professionally. My wife and I were very impressed with all these fellows, their equipment and dedication. As you probably already know, you have some great employees that take care of business. So again, another example of excellent customer service.
Great.
So thank you, guys.
Thank you, and thanks to the group, the Marines that
Yep.
landed there. Is there any public comment for items that are not on the agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you. Communications,
None today. Thank you.
thank you. Jennifer, do you have anything?
None today, thank you.
All right, and fellow board members, anything to report?
Just a couple things. Last Friday, both Aaron Kennedy, Dan Corcoran, and I attended the Regional Water Authority session on and it was put on by the FBI on vulnerabilities of water systems. Very well done. I think it opened the eyes of a lot of the different water systems in the area of potential vulnerabilities we have, and it was a morning well worth spent. One other thing, I was talking with a friend and colleague on another project, and we were talking about one what organizations are trusted in this community? And I said, well, Snowline Hospice and Boys and Girls Club. And he said, and this is someone who's had, interaction with EID, and he mentioned EID. And I said, oh, you're just doing that to make me feel better. He said, no, no, no. So it was just an affirmation of the work of the organization. So.
Thank you, Director Pitt. Any other board comments? Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. Entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar and/or full items.
I will move approval of the consent calendar.
Thank you very much.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, is there any board comment on the consent calendar? Any public comment on the consent calendar?
If members of the public would like to address the board on the approval of today's consent calendar.
Excuse me, we have an item. My name is Ned. I am the Vice Director on the Friends of Hidden Lake, here for the partial transfer back to the community there. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, everybody, for working with us through this time. As you know, it can be difficult to get people to rally together. We're incorporating a nonprofit, all of that. I did get a chance to request some records, and I kind of looked at how this whole district was formed, and it really makes me feel good that the district is being returned to the residents the way that the El Dorado Irrigation District initially got the 2 parcels to serve the community, and I really appreciate everyone's attention and helping us get back there so we don't lose that piece of property. So,
Thank you very much for the comments.
President
Yes.
Dwyer, may I comment on that?
Yes, Brian.
Ned was referring to consent item number 7. This is the transfer of the Hidden Lake parcels back to the community, as he indicated. I just wanted to express my appreciation and give kudos to the community out there. They have put in a tremendous amount of work to organize themselves into an organization called the Friends of Hidden Lake. And I just want to express my appreciation to them. They've been tremendous partners, and I think this is the right thing to do, to return these parcels to that community for their benefit. So, thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Laura Bradley. I live right over Hidden Lake. My mother-in-law owns the property. She's 84. She's lived there for decades. Her husband was one of the first property owners out there in the early 70s and built like a kit home there, and it overlooks the lake. And we've watched so many people go down there, fish, swim, kids, families. It's such a great place for the neighborhood, and I'm so excited that we have an opportunity to do this. Brian and Rachel have been so patient with us as we struggled to get this done, and they were just awesome, and I want to thank you so much. It really means so much to so many in the community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and thanks, Brian, for working that, and I think it was the right thing to do, so it's always easy when it's the right thing. Any other comments on the consent calendar? Anybody online?
If any members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's consent calendar, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any additional comments on the approval of today's consent calendar, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Mansfield. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, thank you. We're ready for information item number 9, which is mussels. Not the kind that you work out.
Obviously, because I'm the one here talking. Yeah. Well, good morning. Good morning. My name is Brian Deason, Environmental Resources Supervisor for the district. And I'm here today with Miss Emily Bertram, Parks and Recreation Manager for the district, and we are going to talk to you about invasive mussels. Next slide, please. So there are invasive mussels in California. They do pose a threat to water infrastructure and just freshwater ecosystems in general. Since 2008, EID has been implementing a plan to monitor and to prevent the introduction of these species into our water bodies. Good news, we have not detected any invasive mussels in our reservoirs. So you may ask, well, why are we here today? And there's been a recent new observation of golden mussels in the Delta. And so it's been getting a lot of publicity. This is the first occurrence of this species in North America. And so we wanted to provide the board with an information item just to describe what actions we are taking. Next slide. All right, so who are these outlaws? We have 3 different species. There's the golden mussel. These are pictures of them in the left image here. The golden mussel, this is native to China, Southeast Asia. It has been introduced into Brazil, and then ultimately just last October was detected in the Delta. We also have quagga and zebra mussels. These two from a family called dracenid mussels. They're native to Russia and Southeast Europe. It's likely that these species hitched a ride on a commercial shipping vessel in the bilge water. That's one mode of transport for their spread. The photo in the center, just to give you some context of the size of these, that's a group of golden mussels. So they can be very small, as young mussels, or can be an eighth of an inch long and can get up to about 2 inches. And then the graphic on the right, that's a zebra mussel. Just wanted to highlight a particular structure that they have that are those threads on the lower side of them. They're called byssal threads. And this allows them to attach very readily and very effectively to structures. Thank you. Okay, so what are the concerns? Well, these species can really wreak havoc on water systems, water infrastructure. They can clog intakes, pipelines, damage boats by getting into various pumping systems. And just as I described, they just generally disrupt freshwater ecosystems. They are filter feeders, and so they can remove all of that microbiota that forms the bottom of the food chain. So they can disrupt the food chain all the way up to fish populations. A few photos here. The photo on the left is a cooling system from a hydropower generation facility, and you can see it's partially clogged with mussels. You can see for vessels that are in the water for long periods of time, they can also accumulate on hard structures of the boat. And the photo on the right, that is a photo of the shoreline of San Justo Reservoir, which is in San Benito County near Hollister. Zebra mussels were detected there in 2008. The reservoir has since been closed. But what you're seeing in that photo is just essentially a blanket of desiccated zebra mussel shells. So they're quite prolific, and they can reproduce exponentially and become a problem quite quickly.
Brian, they survive out of the water? Is that?
No, they do not. They can survive for a certain amount of time. That's actually one management technique to try to get rid of them from infested waters, is to dewater the lake and desiccate them.
So a question, going back to the previous screen, that one right there. You said that the reservoir is closed now?
Yes.
It's being used to collect water, or is it emptied?
So it's closed to recreation.
Okay, there you go. All right, thanks.
Yeah, and they had seismic issues at the San Justo, as I remember. So it may not be just because of the mussels. There's a lot of problems with the San Justo Reservoir.
Not our reservoir, just to make it clear.
Yeah, right, right.
Not, I know, I have a map to highlight that. Thank you.
Okay.
So what does this mean to EID facilities? In general, we have a low level of risk. The probability of these mussels being introduced and being able to become established is relatively low. And there's a couple of different factors that go into that assessment. And one is the proximity to where these are known to occur, types of recreational use, and water quality. So I'll go over those in the next couple of slides. So this is a map of California, and this is showing where zebra and quagga mussels are known to occur. They first showed up in Lake Mead, Lake Havasu, on the border with Arizona, and have moved over. They're primarily located in Southern California, so there's a red star down there. Thank you. And that red box is just an inset to show you zoomed in the number of occurrences where they've been located in Southern California. Now, the star in more towards Central California, that is San Benito County, that's San Justo Reservoir, and then there's another golf course in the vicinity that also has zebra mussels. The blue circle was intended to be right over El Dorado County, but I must have sneezed when I was preparing the graphic. So, but the relative distance between the circle and the star, it's about 150 miles to the nearest observation. Next slide. So this is a map showing golden mussels. This is, again, California, just a different background. You can see a grouping of red dots in the delta. So it was first discovered in the delta on the San Joaquin side, but around Rough and Ready Island, and they have since found numerous occurrences still in the delta. There's a couple of dots there south. That's the O'Neill Forebay, which is just outside of San Luis Reservoir. So that's closer to us, probably 60, 70 miles from the nearest district facilities.
I will ask questions after you go through.
Oh, good.
Well, okay,
Sure.
so the San Francisco Bay, of course, so there's a lot of shipping going up the Sacramento River that ends in, Stockton, and there are some major international ships that go up there carrying imports. So that's probably one of the reasons why this has been put into that area. But then we have these other people who love their boats on the river, and if they don't rinse off their boats, and then they take them into our reservoir, we don't have boats going into reservoirs, do we? Not into Sly Park or?
Boats.
Yeah, people coming, I see boats going up to Lake Tahoe, but any indication that that would be happening in our area if they're not scrubbing off their boats?
Yeah, that's very important. Clean, drain, and dry is
Right.
the philosophy. And Emily will describe
Okay.
some of the experience we have at Sly Park and Jenkinson Lake
Okay.
specifically. But
I'll wait for that one.
yeah,
Thanks.
no, we have a lot of local use.
Right.
So we don't typically see people bringing their houseboat up
Right.
from the Delta and staying on
Okay.
any of our reservoirs. So, types of recreational use. So this was a nice segue. So in general, it's those larger vessels with complex bilge systems, water pumping systems that are in the water for very long periods of time that pose the highest risk of being able to move mussels or their larval stage, the veligers, from one water body to another. Our use at our facilities is a lot of local, daily launched personal watercraft. They come out for the day, they boat around, they go home and park their boat in the garage or in the driveway. We also have a lot of non-motorized use, which is a lower risk type of activity for potentially transporting invasive mussels. And thirdly, water quality. And I think this is most importantly an important indicator of the level of risk. So calcium in particular is an important element necessary for mussels to grow. So they're larval stage, they're free-floating, soft-bodied creatures, but they have to grow a shell. And so calcium is what allows them to do that. And they need certain concentrations of calcium in order to be able to do that. This graphic on the left, this is something I borrowed from CDFW. It shows calcium levels, the scale on the left, so you can see, and then it shows the risk by the various colors. So less than 12 milligrams per liter of calcium and less is considered very low for potential for, in particular, quagga and zebra mussels, but for survival, reproduction, and establishment. So then as the calcium levels increase on the left, you can see up at around 24 milligrams per liter. That's where you have a high potential for them to complete their full life cycle, become established, and have a thriving population. So calcium levels at the district's reservoirs, they're all 5 milligrams per liter or less. And some of them substantially less, 1 to 2 milligrams per liter. So we are considered in that very low risk category. There's an EID logo there with an arrow pointing to very low. That's where we are on the scale. We're also a low risk for the establishment of golden mussels. However, there is information out there that golden mussels can perhaps survive and get established in waters with lower calcium levels relative to quagga and zebra. There we go. I think that's all I had to say about that one. Next slide, please. Regulations. I just want to talk briefly about how we're complying with Fish and Game Code regulations for invasive mussels. So in 2008, when zebra mussels and quagga mussels were first discovered in California, Fish and Game issued a regulation to say that any operator of a water body is required to have a plan. That plan needs to assess the vulnerability of the reservoirs to introduction of invasive mussels, and then also implement a program for monitoring, public outreach, and management actions to take to prevent the introduction. More recently, in response to the identification of golden mussels in the Delta, California Department of Fish and Wildlife issued an emergency regulation. That was the tool they have available to them to take immediate action. That restricts the import, transport, or possession of golden mussels. Next slide, please. In response to the regulations in 2008, the district did prepare a quagga and zebra mussel monitoring plan. That's a screenshot of the cover on the left. We've updated the plan over time with changes in regulations, et cetera. And we most recently updated it in 2025 to incorporate monitoring for golden mussel as well. And I realize I probably missed out on somewhat of an artistic shortcoming here. I probably should have updated the cover page in some creative way. So, next version. I assure you the content is updated. So the plan covers a variety of district reservoirs, Jenkinson Lake, Forebay, the El Dorado Diversion Dam, which is located on the South Fork near Kybers, and then, of course, Capel, Silver, Lake Aloha, and Echo Lake. Next slide. Amongst those reservoirs, we have 12 different monitoring locations that we monitor during the peak recreation season. We follow CDFW's protocols. It involves performing visual surveys at high-use areas, boat ramps. We're looking at boat docks, things that are submerged in the water. And we're also conducting water quality sampling. So we're collecting calcium samples and all of the other various parameters like water temperature, pH, conductivity, et cetera. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Emily to describe recreation's role in this effort.
Good morning, Board. Once again, Emily Bertram, Parks and Recreation Manager. And I just wanted to answer your question from earlier. Last year in 2024, we had just shy of 2,300 boat launches and a little over 100 boat launch annual passes sold. So for 2024, yeah, that's the number of boats.
How many were the annual?
102
Okay,
specifically for boat launching annual passes, and then 2,200, almost 2,300 day use boat launch passes.
okay, thank you for bringing that
Absolutely.
up, because I have several neighbors who like going up there with their little kayaks.
Yes.
And they sometimes go to what is the lake that's below Folsom?
Natomas?
Okay, Nepoma. But they go up there a lot, and they are annual day people.
Yes.
So the question, I guess, and maybe this, you'll answer that, is when we do a notification, those people get major notifications first, the annual people? Because they're the ones using it the most.
So, and I'm going to address what we're doing. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the district has long implemented public education and outreach efforts around invasive mussels and other aquatic species. Next slide, please. So you can see the list of kind of a lot of the things that we do there. Brian and I are currently in the process of updating that invasive mussel page that you see on the right on the district website. We have had an active invasive species page since 2008, but we're just wanting to make sure that all the links are updated and the information includes golden mussel. We have informational kiosks, many different locations through the park. We made sure to update the ones at the boat launches immediately, and we're working on updating the ones in the campgrounds as campgrounds start opening for the recreational season. So currently, these are the efforts that we currently pertain to the quagga and the zebra, but they're, you know, as Brian stated, most of the efforts that work for quagga and zebra are also efforts that are going to work to identify the golden mussels or, you know, stop the spread of the golden mussels. So during peak season, we have for many years done a verbal screening of boats who are entering the lake, which is welcome to EID. Has your boat been in any other waterway other than ours in the last 30 days? Most folks say no, some folks say yes. If yes, oh, where's your boat been? We have a list of all of those counties that are excluded from that San Benito on down, basically. And so if anybody says they have been in one of those waterways, we do ask them to, you know, clean, drain, dry, and return in 30 days. That happens maybe once or twice a year. We tend to, as Brian mentioned, have almost exclusively local or local adjacent use on Sly Park Recreation Area. And so we do reserve, the district does reserve the right to turn those boats away if they don't meet our criteria, which is clean, drain, dry, or only in our waterways in the last 30 days, as the 30-day desiccation period seems to be kind of a standard. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm not as funny as Brian. So since we have learned about this mussel in late December, we hired additional seasonal staff. Typically, our entrance station is unstaffed in the winter season. But we did hire some additional seasonal staff, so now we have 7-day-a-week coverage there. And they are also doing, their particular job is to perform these verbal screenings of any boaters who are entering Sly Park Recreation Area. And what we have found over the 6 weeks before we had to, you know, kind of complete this PowerPoint is you can see, you know, almost 90% of our visitation is from El Dorado County, and the visitation outside of El Dorado County is relatively local. We're not seeing too much long-distance boating at this point. And over a third is those non-motorized boats, which are less concern, less complex, tend to dry out a little bit quicker than a boat with, a live well or anything like that. And part of the, one back, Jennifer, thank you so much, sorry. We also have added in to all campers who are coming for the summer season. They all get a confirmation email when they make the reservation online or over the phone. And in that confirmation email, there is now a blurb about the golden mussel. If you intend to bring your boat up to Sly Park during our camping season, please be aware of this new concern. Make sure you're following CDFW's guidelines on the clean, drain, and dry. Next slide, thanks, Jennifer. And so our planned activities going forward through 2025, recreation and environmental will continue the monitoring program. We're going to continue to survey boaters at Jenkinson, but we are going to extend those surveys to the boaters at Silver and Caples Lake at the boat launches that EID operates. And so that will be having those seasonal staff who will come on for the summer season up there, as those launches are closed right now. When they open and we have seasonal staff, they'll be surveying boaters up there as well. Continue our education and outreach, provide our invasive mussel awareness training to staff. Brian and his crew came up and provided some training to the permanent staff. Seasonal staff will come on in late April. They'll also receive training on the invasive mussel and how to properly educate the visiting public. Continue to participate in the regional discussions with water managers and other operators in the area. Monitor for any new regulations and guidance that CDFW may provide to us. And research any grant opportunities to fund monitoring and staff training. There is the potential for a mussel seeking dog. I would like permission for that. No, that's a pipe dream. But anything that we can find grant opportunities for, we'll certainly look for. Any questions or comments?
Well, we don't manage Folsom Lake, but we do have pumping infrastructure in Folsom. Just curious, are those calcium levels similarly low, given it's the same watershed?
Unfortunately, Director Mansfield, I don't have any specific information on calcium levels in Folsom. But in general, the further you get down the watershed, they tend to increase.
Okay.
So, but that's something I can certainly research. Yep. We have been, Emily mentioned, we're in conversations with other water managers. Bureau of Reclamation did convene a American River and surrounding area workshop to talk about various entities' responses to golden mussel. So we're in conversations with them about activities at Folsom.
And boat launches that in our lakes that we don't control, like does Plessis have a boat launch, and what about Echo? You know?
No, those are great questions. So Places, I think, is primarily just a non-motorized type of watercraft. We operate a boat launch at Silver Lake, near the main dam. We operate a Forest Service-owned, EID-operated boat launch at Caples Lake. There's also a private boat launch there at Caples Lake Resort. At Echo, our monitoring, we monitor at our dam facilities, and the concessionaire there, Echo Lake Chalet, operates and manages the boat launch.
And so are they engaged in this whole thing?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I have a question probably for Emily. Since we had to add staff to enforce or control or make sure that we don't have the invasive species, I know we're just starting the recreation period shortly, and we've already set all our fees but in the future, should we consider a surcharge to perform this service for Fish and Game and ourselves?
That's an interesting question. I think that that would be maybe a discussion amongst the board and then, you know, with my boss, Dan, as to whether there's Berryessa is performing a cleaning, a decontamination. They have a decontamination station that's being paid for, I believe, by the cooperating water agency. Folks have to make a deposit in order to get an appointment, but they get that money back currently. Whether we would do something different, whether it would even be feasible to operate a decontamination station given space constraints at the boat launch at Sly Park.
Yeah, I don't mean not only a decontamination station, but also the additional staff that we have to monitor. I know it's not a huge number, but we try to remain solvent and have the recreation division stand on its own, so.
And we'll look at that rate surcharge.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other board comments or questions? Okay, great presentations. Thank you very much for the biological lesson and lesson in biology. Yeah. Before you go, there's an opportunity for public comment, please. Both online and in the room.
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 9.
Thank you, and thanks again. I feel confident that we have a good program. Thanks to you guys. Okay, moving to information item number 10. Here we go. So how's our water supply?
We'll see.
You
Good morning,
move a
members.
little
A little
closer.
closer, excuse me. Good morning, members of the board. Jordan Baxter, hydrologist for the district. Today I'll be providing an update on the water supply situation for water year 2025. Here we have a photo of an early November snowstorm. Our assistant hydrographer, Nick Padgick, snapped at Caples Lake. Right now, it's covered in snow and ice. You'd see ice fishermen kind of in the foreground there. But yeah, next slide, please. All right, just a little summary of what we'll be talking about today. Overall, below average winter precipitation. We've kind of been on the southern edge of a lot of storm tracks, so not nearly as much precipitation as our neighbors to the north. Jenkinson Lake has filled on February 14th. And then our Project 184 consumptive supplies, they're projected to remain normal. However, there could be some impacts to hydropower generation just due to kind of the water supply outlook up in the high country we're seeing right now. Overall, the district is well positioned to meet our 2025 demand, but we're always operating and looking ahead to the future and the potential for dry times ahead. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about the watershed conditions. The lower watershed reservoirs, so Weber Reservoir, which is a little bit lesser known, just outside of Placerville here, it filled on December 30th. And then Jenkinson Lake up in Pawlicut Pines, which we learned a lot about today, that filled on February 14th. So Jenkinson was in a really good spot to fill. There was quite high carryover storage. And we also, in December and January, were able to bring 2,000 acre-feet over from the South Fork American River through the Project 184 facilities. So that gave us a nice buffer to allow Camp Creek and the local sources to fill by mid-February. One thing I didn't mention at the top, in the board packet, there's some numbers and figures. I updated them this morning to give you the most recent information. So if there's a mismatch, that's the reason why. Okay, shifting gears, snow courses. So this is my personal favorite thing about the hydrography program at EID. We are members of the California Cooperative Snow Survey, so you may have seen it on the news. We measure 3 courses around Caples Lake and the Carson Pass area. It's Caples Lake Snow Course, Upper Carson Pass, and Lower Carson Pass. We measure those 5 times a year. So the first one in January, Coming off some pretty fresh snow in late December, we measured 81% of what we normally do on the historical average. So it started off pretty good. February, as you can remember, January was very, very dry. Little to no snow, and anything that did fall, it was pretty warm. So we measured virtually hole by hole as we went through almost exactly what we measured in terms of snow water equivalent in February as well. So that percent of average for what we normally measure in February dropped down to 54%. And then lastly, the Project 184 reservoirs, they are drawn down, but that's normal for winter conditions, and they will begin filling up once spring runoff begins. Next slide. All right, so unfortunately, I'm not out in the watershed nearly as often as I used to be, but fortunately, there are photographers that are out and about that are much better photographers than I. So on the left here, that's of Weber Reservoir spillway, so just outside of Placerville. Nick Paget took that photo. That was, I think, February 13th or so, but that's been spilling like that since late December. And then on the right, a little bit smaller image, that is Jenkinson spilling. So Reese Blevins, a water treatment plant operator, took that photo. It's kind of a cool perspective. I've never taken a photo kind of through the fence there. But it's, yeah, so Jenkinson Lake began spilling on the 16th, or I think it was the 14th, and that photo was taken the 16th. Next slide. All right, so what we're looking at here, this is a plot of snow water equivalent. So when we're measuring snow, we're concerned about the depth, but ultimately, as a water supplier, we're interested in how much water is in the snow. So in these core samples we're taking, the weight, if you were to melt down that amount of snow, how many inches of water if it was all melted down? So that's what this plot is showing. So these are the average snow water equivalents for the 3 courses we measure. The red dotted line, that's the historical average we're comparing things to. The blue trace, that's looking at water year 2024. So what did we measure last year, which was a below normal year. And then the green trace is this year. So you can see the green trace, it's just below average, but far above how we started in 2024. Pretty darn close in February, comparing 24 to 25, but far below the average. And then what we're gonna be measuring on Friday, I'm expecting to be somewhere around 20 inches. And that's about 70% of average. So we'll be below the blue line when we measure on Friday. Next slide, please. All right, so snapshot looking at reservoir elevations. I mentioned that those Project 184 reservoirs are drawn down, but that is normal for this time of year. So the top 4 listed there, Caples Lake, Silver Lake, Echo Lake, and Lake Aloha. We're looking at 62% full Caples Lake, a good spot to be as our most important high country water supply reservoir. Silver Lake at 16%, that is very normal. Echo Lake, 0% can look staggering, but one thing to note there is that we only measure the top 6 feet of that reservoir, what the dam was created at. So it's at its natural rim, and there's water spilling into Echo Creek, which then reaches Lake Tahoe. And then lastly, for the Project 184, Lake Aloha up in Desolation Wilderness, that's currently at 36% of normal. And as we've talked about, both Jenkinson and Weber are 100% full or greater and spilling. I put an asterisk next to Weber Reservoir, just noting that, so the Division of Safety of Dams prevents us from keeping 2 feet of flashboards in that spillway I have the photo of. So after April 1st, we're able to increase with flashboards in the spillway. We get an additional almost 100 acre feet. So the max capacity at Weber is 1,006 acre feet, and anticipate probably getting there in mid-April once we can put those boards in. You're ahead of me today, Jen. Thank you. Okay, so looking ahead, the Department of Water Resources, they provide forecasts for different hydrologic regions in the state. This is known as the Bulletin 120. Our FERC license that dictates our minimum stream flow requirements, lake level targets, the compliance point, if you will, or the point that they forecast for that's important to us is the American River below Folsom Lake. In February, that was called at 83%, so it falls in the range of 75 to 100%. That's a below normal, and so we will, as a district, make sure that our stream flow requirements match that, and when we get into the summer and fall months, making sure that our lake level targets match what a below normal states. Oh, sorry, I wasn't quite done. Thank you. I did ramble a lot, though. Okay, so another thing the district keeps an eye on is sea surface temperatures out in the Pacific. what's known as ENSO neutral, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or excuse me, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. That can have kind of a look ahead as to what we can expect for precipitation amounts as well as storm tracks, whether it's going north or south. Where we're at latitude-wise, statistically, it's kind of a toss-up no matter what. Still something we look at. We're in a La Nina right now, and the Pacific Northwest, Northern California is pretty wet, which is normal for a La Nina. However, March into May is predicted that those sea surface temperatures are going to be more close to normal and more of a neutral situation, so we'll keep an eye on that. Oh, that's fine. I already, yeah. We're good. Okay, so this, we talked about the Bulletin 120 today and in previous board presentations. I just wanted to provide a snapshot, I don't think we've ever done this before, of what it actually looks like. This is the summary. It's hosted on a state website referred to as California Data Exchange Center. So this is starting at the north of the state, going down to the Tulare Lake Basin, all of those different hydrologic regions that are forecasted. I've highlighted us in yellow, the American River below Folsom, or what we're looking at, 83% of normal. But I think this does also provides a good picture of that spatial distribution of precipitation. You see a lot of over 100% as you're towards the top. And as you go down, there's kind of a cliff right where we're at. And everything is well below normal as you go south in the state. So this, as we've talked about, can have impacts on our local conditions, because we're even lower than that 83%. Our local conditions aren't reflective of what our Bulletin 120 is going to dictate our stream flow releases are. Next slide. And this is a different way of kind of looking at the same information, more of a map view. So what this is looking at is water year to date, precipitation as a percent of average. This was in a National Weather Service briefing back in February 11th. I really liked it, so I borrowed it. But it was a snapshot in time on February 11th. There's a lot of colors here. The greens and blues, generally that's above normal, above 100%. The reds and oranges, kind of far below, and that lime green, more yellow, is close to normal, if you will. And you can see on the right, I've kind of zoomed in, the larger polygon in there, that's the American Basin. So starting at kind of where it says Carson City on the side, but that's Lake Tahoe at the corner of the state. Going down towards Sacramento, that's the American. You can see there's more of those lime green yellows in the North Fork American, so that's above normal. Orange as you get kind of in the Middle Fork, and then where we're at is all red, so far below normal. And then the Upper Cosumnes, which is the polygon below it, where we're getting water from Camp Creek. Luckily, Jenkins is already full, but that does not have a lot of snow in it either. So we're kind of at that. All those storm tracks all just went north of us, and this is just a picture showing what the impact or the fallout from that was. Next slide. All right, so going down the hill into Folsom Reservoir. So Folsom Reservoir is currently just over 660,000 acre feet. That's about 138% of the historical average. So pretty full compared to normal, and which is not ideal for me because that's where our dogs go for a dog park. So there's less shoreline to play in, but so it goes. It's good to see water in Folsom.
But is this essentially because the precipitation is coming in as rain into the high country rather than snow, we don't get the snow storage?
Yes, it is. You stole my next point's thunder, so but that's
Sorry, well, it's impacting my skiing, so.
mine as well. But yes, very, very good point. So yeah, so Folsom increased. I thought this was an interesting, I just kind of did the math on it because I visually watched it come up so fast. Almost 40 feet in the first 15 days of February. So that's 300,000 acre feet. And that's because a lot of those storms in February, that snow line was around 8,000 feet. Luckily, my pass is at Kirkwood, so it's a little bit higher elevation. But yeah, lucky you. I was babysitting. And so, yeah, so luckily above 8,000 feet, or I'm sorry, not luckily, but it was above 8,000 feet. And so a huge watershed area got rain. So a lot of water in Folsom. Downside is we don't have that reservoir storage of the snowpack in those 6,000 to 8,000 feet like we often do. Overall, staff anticipate relying on the local supplies provided by permit 21112 to meet our El Dorado Hills demand this year. Next slide. Okay, just a little visual here. This is a plot of Folsom Lake storage levels. There's a lot of colors and lines here. I'll try to deconstruct it, but the blue area, that is kind of the shaded blue. That is the average. The red trace at the bottom, that's an example of a really dry year, so water year 1977. The blue, light blue with the triangles on every month, that is a wet year, 1983. And then I also included last year, 2024. That's in the green trace, and then that heavier blue trace is this year. So you can see that we were below average, kind of lost storage in January, which is never great. And then those February storms really helped out. So came up, encroached on top of conservation by over 100,000 acre feet, and they've recently, as of last week, started releasing more from Folsom. So you see that turnaround. I was able to see that pretty visually yesterday. I was at the lake with my family, and about 20 feet away from the water line, there was just a huge deposit of all this wood. So the lake came up, stranded everything, and came back down. So the kids were building forts. The dogs had lots of fetch. They're all happy. But it was just kind of cool to see. Usually that all those sticks are right at the water line, but because it retreated so much, it was pretty far away from it. Next slide. All right, lastly, customer engagement. So the district always encourages customers to stay informed and involved in water efficiency efforts. These include complimentary water surveys, information on rebates and incentives for water efficient appliances and fixtures, with the overall goal being to support our customers in adopting practices that contribute to the long-term sustainability of all of our water resources. And that's all I have. I'm open to any questions. If there's none, I'll leave you with this photo. This was taken at Camp Creek, and this is right before we closed Camp Creek Tunnel and let natural inflows top off Jenkinson.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the board? No? Well done.
Thank you all for your time.
Any comments from the public?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 10, no action required, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 10.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to item 11, the billing process.
Super exciting. Very, very exciting. It is for me. At least someone's excited, right? Hey, good morning, board. Jenny Downey, Customer Service Manager with the district, here today for an information item requested by Director Anzini on our billing processes and our online bill pay system. Next slide. So a quick summary of what we'll be going over today. We'll be going over our meter reading and billing processes, our late fee policy and customer payment options, our online bill pay, some website resources and materials, and then also a payment history enhancement exploration. Next slide. Little housekeeping. Here are our relevant board policies and administrative regulations regarding our billing practices. So first off, our billing process. So our meters are read and billed every 2 months. This is accomplished through 8 billing cycles, 4 in 1 month and 4 in another. Payments are due 21 days after the statement is generated. We also have a 5 business day grace period after that due date, so it essentially gives the customer 4 weeks to pay before we start considering them delinquent. So our late fee policy and some payment options. A past due notice is generated and a $10 late fee if there's no payment made within that, before that grace period is over. If there's no payment plan that is established by our customer, and it goes out for any balances greater than $11. So I do want to bring up that, as you're aware, we went into a new billing system last year in April. And unfortunately, we didn't find out until after we went live that the new system was not suppressing the notices that were going out for lower than $11. They weren't getting their $10 late fee, but the notice was going out. And this essentially is because the system still considers that balance delinquent. It still has to go into our aging bucket. So a hot fix was put in place in December, but over that 7-month period, about 850 notices were mailed out that were below that $11. But we did get that hot fix, and then we have an update coming, and the permanent fix is going in place probably in the next couple weeks. So once that past due notice does go out, it gives them an additional 10 days to either contact us to set up a payment plan or to make a payment. If nothing is, that customer doesn't pay, then we'll go ahead and send out a second past due notice. They will get an additional $25 assessed for any balances greater than $50. During that bill cycle, there are no additional fees, and the fees are not compounded on top of each other. Some of our payment options and methods for our customers. They can mail their payments in the good old-fashioned way. You'd be surprised how many people still mail their payments in. This also includes payments that customers might make through their own bank's online bill pay. They mail us a check in. We take payments over the phone, still in person here in our lobby. We have a drop box out front, and then also through our online bill pay site. As I mentioned, we do offer payment plans to eligible customers. We work with them in any way that we can to help them get caught back up on their bills. We do also help our customers with advanced estimates. Sometimes customers will call at the beginning of the year and say, hey, what did I pay last year? So they can kind of get an idea of what their bills are going to look like. And sometimes customers will kind of pay themselves a little bit more, Jennifer's raising her hand, to help them get into that summertime when they know the bills are going to get higher, and just kind of even that out for them. We also do kind of a non-formal budget billing, kind of the same thing, but customers will look at, again, what's my total, what can I, pay essentially monthly. We have customers that send payments in monthly, sometimes every couple weeks, whatever we can do to help them get that, balance a little bit easier. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we do have our online bill pay site, and it is a standalone. It does not necessarily communicate with our billing system. So when customers go to our online bill pay site, they can do a quick payment. They don't have to log in or create a profile. They can put their account number in and the amount they want to pay and make a quick pay on there. If they do set up an online profile, they can make a one-time payment. They can schedule a payment, I believe, up to 21 days in advance, and they can set up reoccurring credit card payments. We do have payment alerts. So say the husband logs in and makes a payment or a couple payments, and then the wife logs in and it will alert them that there are, someone's making multiple payments on there. We do have an option called My Wallet to where they can put multiple cards in there. Again, that's when they're wanting to maybe link up multiple accounts in there, and when they have to pay for their rental and when they want to use a different card for a different account. They can view up to 12 months of their actual statements online. They can manage their email notifications. This could be for notifications of their bill has been generated, a reminder. It comes out about 5 days before the bill is due. And then if their reoccurring payment declines, there's also email notifications for that. As I mentioned, they can link multiple accounts. I believe 20 accounts per profile. That's maybe for some of our bigger customers that helps them manage their online accounts. And then there is language preference between English and Spanish, so you don't have to go to your Google and change your language preference. There's an option right there on our website. So our website resources, so outside of our online bill pay on our district's website at eid.org, there are a lot of different resources for our customers. And I'm just going to highlight some of the ones that are really important to our customers and that we see them using more often. There's a section of our payment options where it goes over how we take payments, where they can make their payments at. They can request a payment plan right there online. There is a section on how to read their bill, so it breaks it down from what each area means on their bill. There's a section on how meters are read, and that's really important for our customers when they're looking for, their meter, trying to confirm their meter reading, or even as my next bullet here for checking for leaks, because using that meter to read it really will help them in their efforts of checking for any leaks. We also have a section on how to transfer service, so whether they've purchased the property or if they're a renter. There are additional information, such as our news releases and our waterfront that comes out every 2 months. So, online bill pay history enhancement. This was requested by Director Anzini to look into. So as I mentioned, through the online bill pay site, it will only reflect your payments that you made through the bill pay site. So say you come into the office and make a payment, or you mail your payment in, or you use your bank's online bill pay site, those payments, because it's a standalone bill pay system, does not reflect those payments. So they can only see the payments they made on the bill pay site itself. So when we reached out to our vendor, they said that it would be an implementation cost of $12,000 to be able to essentially create a file and configure the system to be able to import those historical payments for other methods that customers, might be making their payments. So as I said, configuring, we plan to import 12 months of historical payments to match the 12 months of their billing system statements in there. Working with our IT department and our vendor, we estimate to have this go live about fall, hopefully sooner if we can. So that is everything on our billing and our online bill pay system. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Thank you. Any board questions or comments?
I will make my comment now. I just want to, thank you very much for bringing this information to us. And it all started with my bill in June that said I was late 9 cents. Okay, and that was the start of it. And I said, 9 cents, okay, I'll pay it next month, and put 9 cents additional. It didn't reflect. But then I was a little frustrated with that, and I had other items on my own handling, and then I got a client or a constituent complaining about the bill pay. His was significantly bigger because it was an HOA. And I'm trying to configure that, and I said, okay, I'm gonna get online and look at my account, which I bill pay all the time through my bank. I just want to remind one thing we need to notify under bill pay, that when you're making an online payment, which I've done for 10 years through my bank, I just manually put it in when I get my bill. I don't write a check. I don't come to the office. I pay it that way. I never paid attention to the history part until I started looking at everything else and why I wasn't getting a 9 cent credit. But you answered that because it started in April when you did, and I don't remember ever getting a notification that there was a change in our billing process. But that answers why I had this continual 9 cents. And trying to configure this and trying to look for history, and I got on my garbage bill through El Dorado disposal. My history was there, every payment I made the same way. So it was like, okay, why don't we have history? And I may have come off a bit caustic because by then I had received a couple of constituent accusations that EID was trying to rip off customers. Already our rates were high, water was in high use, people were angry with $600 bills, which is not my problem, but I was trying to handle it. And that's where we are now. I think it's really important to also state somewhere when making an online payment, if your bill is under $1, which mine was definitely, my bank could not pay that 9 cents because they don't process anything under $5, most of them. And if there was a problem, and elderly people like me converted a 6 to a 3, and somehow I got less 9 cents on my bill, and it just kept going. But until I started paying attention in August, when I got the complaint, that was the only reflection that I could only do. So I had to pay with 9 cents, which I walked up to the counter, and that was taken care of. But staff was already working on this issue. My concerns are if people are really paying online, we have a lot of options for them, but most people will look at history. Okay, the very first thing they're going to look at, why isn't there, and I had no history in mine. So that's why I asked for the report, and hopefully that answers a lot of people who might be listening in to this concern, and we certainly need to update the clients, our ratepayers, on a change which will benefit all of us, because there are many avenues to pay our bills, but one way is to make sure more and more people are using online to look at their financials, and I think it's time to update a little bit. So that's where I'm coming from. And thank you, but we need to reiterate that if you pay through your own bank's bill pay, they won't pay a bill if it's under a certain amount. And I could not write a check for 9 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Anzini. Any other board comments?
Just a quick question. When you do get comments, what are the majority of comments on the bill pay are you seeing, people concerned?
One of them are, why can't I see my payment? I walked in your office, and made that payment. Most people that use our online bill pay site are paying through our online bill pay site, so we don't always get that. Some of them are more about how do I set up reoccurring if my payment's already if my card's already in my wallet. How do I, get back to the EID website? Because like I said, it's there, you bounce back and forth. So using the website the payments is the simple part. It's setting some of the stuff up that can get anybody sometimes.
And again, if there are inquiries on the history, you say that it should be reflected by autumn.
Yes, we can let them know that. If anybody calls in right now or emails in, we export their payment history. Every year during tax time, people will not even go to their website, they're online, and they'll call us and say, hey, can you export me my last year's bills for my taxes? So this will be a benefit to be able to tell customers that they can go and get that. Will they do it? We'll encourage it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Actually, that's really good statement to make, because, when you're doing your taxes, I don't collect up the receipts anymore. I go to the pharmacy, I download the whole year, and then it matches my insurance bill. So, it's a lot more online. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Any other board comment? Okay, I've got a comment and a question. Last meeting, we congratulated ourselves on the Hanson software implementation and said things were all great. And I thank you, Director Anzini, for bringing up the issue of a glitch in our bill pay system that affects several customers, more than several, actually. Yeah, a bunch. And it's obviously an emotional issue for people when they get a late notice, and so I'm glad that we're getting that fixed. I'm glad that we're going to improve the system to show the payment history. Are there any other issues with our bill paying and any other glitches in the system that we found?
Yes, like any
Wanna tell us about it?
upgrade. Yes, some customers may never notice, and some, they will. We've had some more bill print issues, is more of what I would say, to where it is printing that they have a credit on their bill when they don't actually have a credit on their bill. It's affecting probably less than 100 customers right now for that. What that is when we converted over, they had a overpayment at some point on their account. And when the conversion took place, that payment came over as unapplied, when it really had already been applied to their bills. So it's kind of like this hanging credit out there that it really doesn't have. And Infor, who is the owner of our billing system, is working on that, on getting that updated. Other little things we've had here or there with a base charge not billing out, nothing huge, I would say, more here and there. But those are two probably, that is our current outstanding item that we're still working on and trying to get fixed.
The erroneous $25 credit, is that the one here?
No, that was a low income issue. So as you know, we have a low income for our sewer customers to where they get $25 off their base charge every bi-month bill.
Oh, I thought that's what you're talking about, the credit.
No, this was like an overpayment credit. So these are two different things. That one is still being worked on to try to figure out how it's not going to reflect on their bill that they have a credit that they don't have. The $25 credit one, what that was is, say you owned multiple properties and one of your tenants was on our low income program, but your other tenant was not on low income. How the system converted it over, it was giving all your accounts that were in your name that $25 credit. So essentially, it's how you tie the low income to the contact ID is what we had to do. We had to go in and reconfigure some of the contacts on there. So we had some customers who got a $25 credit for low income when they never should have gotten a $25 low income.
And they probably never reported it.
Correct. Maybe one person did, and that's how we found it.
So, we try to be as transparent as we can. Have we reached out to both the customers that got the erroneous credit and the ones that had all the customers that have been affected by our software glitches?
So the ones that got the erroneous credit, yes, they got, the $25 low income credit. They received a letter letting them know that this was inadvertently billed on your account and that it would be
Very
put
good.
back on your account. The credit one is a little harder because we don't know. It's not affecting every single time the bill comes out. Most of the customers that it's affected, we've been in communication with because they've talked to us or through email. So we have those customers we're talking to and working through those with. Again, it wasn't like we just knew it was happening or had a list of exactly who it was happening to. We have this list of who has this on their account, but it may not actually be printing incorrectly on their bill either. So it's kind of chasing its own tail back and forth. So if we know, we can talk to the customer about it and explain it. And we've been getting them exports out of the account to show them that they really don't have this credit on their account.
That'd be hard to explain.
It is not easy to explain.
Yeah.
That is correct.
But I think it's important that we be transparent and proactive and reach out to the customers that we know are affected so that we can try to explain the situation to them as opposed to having them one day look at their bill and get irate and come to us. So it's better if we reach out and get in front of the problem.
Yeah, and this has been unfortunately occurring since April, so these customers do know what's happening, unfortunately.
Ever since the price of eggs went up.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other board comment? Any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 11, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 11. No action necessary.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you, Jennifer. Jenny. Jennifer, too.
Moving on to item number 12, information item number 12, finance and our credit rating.
Okay. Good morning, Director Dwyer, members of the board. Jamie Bandy, Director of Finance. I am here today to present an overview of the district's current credit ratings that we have recently received from both Moody's and also Standard & Poor's. Okay, so to begin with, I'd just like to share that both agencies have affirmed very strong ratings for the district. which reflects our solid financial strategies, very stable outlook, as well as our effective management practices. So why is this important? Why does the district strive for strong credit ratings? Essentially, it signals a positive financial management and stability for the district. It really represents the organization's trustworthiness and our low default risk. In addition to that, it also helps keep our debt issuance costs low. So with the stronger credit rating kind of in our personal lives, when we're also looking for loans, it allows us lower interest rates, which then essentially allows us to have lower debt service payments. So overall, just making our capital improvement project funding more affordable. Okay, the slide here, this is just a graphic of essentially both Moody's and S&P's rating structure. So in the box on top, highlighted in yellow, the district is in the AA category for both of the credit rating agencies. That AA category represents very strong capacity to meet financial commitments as well as a very low credit risk. And then the smaller box on the bottom, within each of those credit ratings, it also drills down a little bit further. So you'll see in the next couple of slides, specifically the ratings that we have received is the AA3 rating from Moody's as well as the AA- from S&P. So that just kind of shows you where those ratings fall within the AA category. Okay, so looking specifically now at the rating agencies. So Moody's did provide the district with an AA3 rating. And I just want to note here that that's for our outstanding revenue bonds. Moody's does not evaluate our subordinate debt. So in our case, that's our 2022 pension bond. Just to some of the highlights that Moody's based their credit rating on is the district's diverse water supplies, our large system size, as well as the low poverty and strong income levels. And we'll look at each of these things in a little bit more detail. So with any credit rating, obviously it's sort of just a snapshot in time, and there's always potential to upgrade those credit ratings as well as downgrade that rating. Moody's has highlighted that in order to potentially upgrade that rating in the future, we do need to sustain our annual debt service coverage ratio. They would like to see it above 2 times, and also consistently maintain a cash reserve of over 250 days. And we will also talk about that in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. At the same time, our credit rating can also go down, and some of those potential risks include if we do not continue our regular rate increases, if we don't continue to implement those, or if our annual debt service coverage falls consistently below 1.5 times, and also combining both of those with our days cash on hand dropping below 150 days. Now looking at S&P, so S&P did rate the district. They gave us a AA- credit rating for our senior revenue bonds. S&P does look at our subordinate debt, and we received an A+ rating for again, that pension obligation bond. Some of the factors that S&P noted as part of their rating include, again, the ample water supply that the district has. They really looked and emphasized the strong liquidity recovery following the Caldor fire. So that was one area that S&P really focused on. The approval of our multi-year rate increases, which currently extend through 2028. Again, the affordable service rates in relation to the income and the poverty level of our residents. And then lastly, they really looked at our policies and our robust insurance policies to mitigate wildfire as well as cybersecurity risks. So like Moody's, they also highlighted our potential upgrade and downgrade factors. Again, really following in the same manner, sustaining our financial performance, making sure that we continue to implement those rate increases and continue to have strong debt service coverage would potentially upgrade our rating in the future. In the same manner, S&P also looked at our revenues for potential downgrade. So they highlighted any decline in our FCC or hydroelectric revenues, or also failure to sustain that day's cash on hand. Okay, so a little bit more detail. There were a couple of areas that both rating agencies looked at, and so we'll highlight those in the next few slides. So first, they kind of looked at our service area and our system characteristics and what that means. So again, both agencies highlighted the district's water supply and also our sufficient wastewater treatment capacity. In addition to that, they both highlighted really that the district has a very modest anticipated growth in both the customer base and usage. As mentioned on previous slides, they looked at the low poverty rate and strong income levels of the district's customers. And then really just individually looking at the water system and the wastewater system, some of the things that they highlighted is that the water system is responsible or brings in about 54% of our revenue system, of our operating revenue. And again, looking at those three primary sources and noticing that the supply significantly is more than the current demand. And then the wastewater system, again, 30% of our operating revenue, and also just highlighting that it's the wastewater services is about half of the total water system customer base. Okay, so our debt service coverage and liquidity is another area that they looked at. So again, just kind of looking at our current debt service coverage and really looking future what that's going to look like. The multi-year rate increases are really highlighted and encouraged in order to maintain our credit ratings. And then another thing that both rating agencies highlighted is the district's practice of making those prepayments on our debt service. So that really helps kind of pay down the debt, decrease the amount of interest that we're paying, and that also helps our debt service coverage ratio. And then another item that we've added that I wanted to share in today's presentation is that the district's key performance indicators and goals, we are beginning this year, we're adding a measurement for the days cash on hand so that we can, continue to monitor that and really highlight the importance of that. And what I've included here on this slide, this is from the American Water Works Association, or AWWA benchmarking. And so as you can see here, the breakdown, this is for combined utilities, and this is the total days cash on hand. So you see the 25th percentile is 240 days 240 days of cash on hand. The district, our 23 ACFR reported that we were about 248 days, so we are, a little bit in the lower percentile, but obviously this is something that the district is really keeping an eye on in terms of our operations, really our financial planning and our budgeting. So this is an area that's that we're really paying attention to and working to increase as we move forward. And then one of the last areas that the rating agencies look at is our debt and legal covenants. Essentially what this is talking about, so our bonds as well as our installment payments are secured by our water and our wastewater revenues, meaning we don't have an additional reserve fund currently that those payments are secured by. However, both rating agencies highlighted that our favorable liquidity does offset that risk. And this is not uncommon that there isn't an additional reserve fund that covers debt service payments. And then lastly on here, looking at all of our current outstanding debts, we do have fixed rates on each of those issuances. So meaning we have a set interest rate that does not change throughout the life of the debt unless we refinance or do something with it. This obviously helps with budgeting and really kind of the financial planning of looking ahead. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight on here is, generally speaking, our outstanding debt service currently is pretty level for the next about 10 years. At that point, then we do see a drop in our debt service payments, which then just allows for future capacity. And one other thing I do want to highlight is both of these ratings from Moody's and S&P did include our potential 2024 and 2027 bond issuances. So it wasn't, a snapshot in time before we just completed our most recent issuance. They did include that as well. Okay, so again, just highlighting both Moody's and S&P. The ratings that we received reflect the district's stable financial position, our effective strategies, and the ability to manage our financial risks. And overall, what this really means is that it really just helps us keep our future debt issuances low, which really provides the district a better standing for our ongoing operations, our capital improvement projects, and any future growth that we'll see.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, it was mentioned in the water supply update that, potentially hydroelectric generation might be a little lower. So are we safe in assuming there's ample communication between your department and operations to make sure we're updating and forecasting interruptions to
Yes,
non-rate
absolutely.
revenues?
Any financial planning that we do, we work together, all departments, to really look ahead at that. And I would say in general, we do probably plan more on the conservative side for most of our planning, so to really kind of capture any future fluctuations.
Thank you. Other comments from the board? Is there any public comment on this information item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item 12, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 12.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. It's good to know that our finances are in good shape as reported by the credit rating bureaus. And it's always a trade-off if we prepay some of the things as we have practiced in the past. That reduces our cash on hand. So it's kind of, one up and one down. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brian. Information item number 13.
Rounding out the last of the information items on today's agenda before we move on to the action items. Good morning, board and members of the public. My name is Brian Polson. I'm general counsel at EID. And I'm here today to present an information item today to discuss the district's water rates, the legal landscape that governs those rates, connection charges and the associated statutory and regulatory requirements with connection charges, and then accessory dwelling units and how the district apportions its rates and charges and connection charges to accessory dwelling units. So, next slide, please. Relevant to today's discussion are two prior board actions. One is the adoption of the district's most recent cost of services study and approval of the next several years of rates, and that happened in 2023. And then last year in 2024, the board approved its facility capacity charge update study, which sets forth the methodology for how the district charges capacity charges, or what we sometimes refer to as connection charges. Next slide, please.
Facility capacity charges were compiled and presented to the board by outside consultants that are experts in those areas. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
So to provide a little overview of the presentation today, I'll first discuss Proposition 218 and its requirements associated with water rates. I'll talk a little bit about accessory dwelling units and then and our connection charges, and then I will discuss how we apply those to accessory, both fees and charges to accessory dwelling units. To begin, Proposition 218, which I know the board is familiar with and many people are, was enacted as an initiative in 1996 to provide further, I'll call them sideboards, on both the state and the local government's ability to assess taxes and fees. Prop 218 followed, of course, Proposition 13, enacted by the voters in 1978, which set limits on the amount of property tax that could be collected by local governments and the requirement that taxes be enacted with a 2/3 majority in the legislature. Prop 218 applied some of those same parameters to local governments, that local governments could not enact local taxes or special taxes without voter approval. And it also provided restrictions on what are referred to as property-related fees that local governments could impose, separate and apart from taxes. And so I'll talk in a little bit more detail about that. Next slide, please. Those fees, referred to as property-related fees, must comply with the strict procedural and substantive requirements included in Prop 218. And Prop 218 is enshrined in the state's constitution. So it was a constitutional amendment that included these requirements. In 2006, the California Supreme Court, in a case called Bighorn Desert View Water Agency versus Virgil, interpreting Prop 218 said, water rates are property-related fees and are therefore subject to Proposition 218. Prop 218 itself doesn't define what property-related fees are, but the Supreme Court interpreting that provision said, water rates are, in fact, subject to that requirement. So since that time, water agencies, including the district, have had to comply with these requirements. As I said, there are both procedural and substantive requirements. The procedural requirements are largely that water agencies notify their customers when they're going to impose or increase their fees, water rates, wastewater rates, and provide an opportunity for those customers to protest the rates. Substantively, the rates cannot exceed the cost of providing the service, and they must be proportionally allocated to the users based on the actual cost to serve those users. Finally, the funds collected by the district cannot be used for purposes other than that for which they were collected. Next slide, please. So the district complies with these procedural and primarily substantive requirements by conducting what we refer to as a cost of services study. Sometimes this is referred to as a cost of study analysis. But this is the method whereby we are able to comply with Proposition 218. And effectively what the cost of services study does is it says, hey, what are our costs? What is the revenue requirement that we need to be able to collect from our customers? We do that by looking at things, for example, like the capital improvement plan over the next 5 years, the annual budget, and the 5-year financial plan. We take those documents to identify what are the costs of running this operation, and then how do we apportion those costs to our various customers in all the different customer classes. So for example, we would break out, well, these are the costs for just providing the water services. And then among those that receive water services, how are we going to apportion those costs to each of the customer classes, single-family residential, multifamily, commercial, et cetera, et cetera. And the cost of services study applies different methodologies or variations of methodologies to apportion those costs to each of our customer classes. And I'll elaborate that a little bit more later in the slideshow. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's a little high-level overview of Prop 218 and the cost of services study process. Next, I'll talk about accessory dwelling units. An accessory dwelling unit is essentially a secondary housing unit that's located on the same premises as a primary residential unit. This can be, they can be attached or detached. An attached accessory dwelling unit might be like a second story that you add to your home, or you convert your attached garage into a separate living quarter, or you build out your basement. A detached accessory dwelling unit is, as it sounds, is detached from the primary residential facility. So you add a small housing unit in your backyard, or you convert a shed or something into living quarters. Importantly, to qualify under the law as an accessory dwelling unit, the dwelling unit must provide independent living facilities. It must include, for example, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a sleeping area, all separately and apart from the primary residential unit. Next slide, please. It's no secret that California has a housing shortage. This has been going on for some time, and so in recent years, the legislature has enacted a number of reforms, legislative reforms, statutory reforms primarily, to promote housing and housing development, and particularly in areas such as Southern California, where there's already, there's a large shortage in housing, it's very expensive, but to promote what is called infill development, that is, converting spaces that are already developed with additional housing, as opposed to constructing new housing developments outside of, for example, urban cores. These laws have really been targeted at these areas, and the idea is to make it easier for homeowners to construct accessory dwelling units in order to meet this housing need. So some of the statutory reforms have established a standardized framework for evaluating and approving applications for building permits associated with accessory dwelling units. They have limited the review times and the discretionary authority to approve building permits for accessory dwelling units. And importantly for our purposes, they have limited the fees with which local governments can charge for the construction of accessory dwelling units. Next slide, please. As far as the district is concerned, the primary fee associated with connecting or construction of an accessory dwelling unit is the connection charge. So utilities like ours, and as we've talked about, charge a fee to connect to our system. That fee is largely designed to recuperate costs for infrastructure that we've already built to accommodate that new development, and to recover the costs associated with future infrastructure that will be necessary to accommodate that additional growth. The ADU reforms enacted in recent law make a distinction as it relates to the ability to charge for an ADU, a connection fee. They make a distinction between those that are attached and those that are detached, okay? For an attached ADU, second story, basement, etc., utilities may no longer require that the ADU be served with a separate metered connection. Okay, so for an attached ADU, we cannot require that they have a separate metered connection. Neither can we charge the capacity charge associated with that additional connection. For detached ADUs, these are the ones that are physically separate from the existing primary residential facility, utilities they're not required to, but they may require a separate metered connection. And if they do, they may charge a connection charge or a capacity charge, but that charge must be specifically calculated based on the square footage of the ADU or the number of plumbing fixtures. So the law is very specific with regard to how that capacity charge is calculated. Okay, next slide. Now, there's an important distinction that I wanted to make with regard to fees and charges. When I refer to fees or rates, okay, we talked about how Proposition 218 is the law that governs how the district charges and increases its water rates and wastewater rates. For connection fees, they're not governed by Proposition 218. Rather, they're governed by what is referred to as the Mitigation Fee Act. This is a statute in law that provides restrictions and directions on how utilities can charge for connecting to their system. The Supreme Court has determined that connection charges are not property-related fees under Proposition 218 that are subject to the procedural and substantive requirements that we talked about. This is different from water rates, which are property-related fees. You might be asking yourself, boy, that seems odd, and I myself have sort of scratched my head at this, but I think the rationale, at least as set forth in the Supreme Court's decision in the Elric case versus the city of Culver City, said connection charges are one-time charges that are voluntarily assumed by the applicant. In other words, you don't have to pay that charge. You only have to pay it if you elect to apply for a building permit or a connection to a utility. Whereas, once you're connected, you don't have any choice in the payment of the water and wastewater rates that a utility charges you for ongoing service, okay? That's the distinction that the Supreme Court made in that case, and that's why capacity charges are not governed by Proposition 218. Next slide, please. So how does this relate to the district and what the district charges to accessory dwelling units? Well, long story short, after the 2017 statutory reforms, the district no longer requires accessory dwelling units, whether detached or attached, to have a separate metered connection. Instead, we simply serve the ADU with the existing metered connection at the primary residence. Neither do we charge an additional connection charge for the ADU, even if the ADU is detached. Remember, I said that the law allows us to, it doesn't require us to, but it allows us to charge a separate capacity charge for a detached ADU. But it requires that we calculate that in a manner that, put frankly, we simply can't figure out how to do, and neither can virtually anyone. The methodology in the district's facility capacity study, which, as President Dwyer pointed out, was developed by one of our expert consultants, and which is widely utilized throughout the state, it relies on the meter size to determine the cost associated with that meter. It does not differentiate between the square footage of one connection and the number of plumbing fixtures for another connection. It simply says, if you purchase a 3/4 inch meter from us to serve primary, residential use, then the cost will be X, okay? So because that we don't utilize square footage or number of plumbing fixtures, we do not charge the capacity fee, the additional capacity fee to the detached accessory dwelling unit that the law otherwise would allow us to do.
Brian, if the person constructing this accessory dwelling unit, they can determine they want to have an additional connection and separate meter, then they would pay the capacity charge?
Yeah, that's a good distinction here. An applicant can apply for a separate meter to serve their accessory dwelling unit. In which case, I'm looking at our development services. I don't see here, but Jenny, do you want to answer that? I really don't know the answer. I can say that there would be a case in which, under the law, the district could charge the existing facility capacity charge, even though it's not based on number of plumbing fixtures, to an applicant that applies because they want to have a separate metered connection. Maybe they're going to rent it out and they don't want to have to deal with the bill or something like that. But Jenny, why don't you address our practice?
So our administrative regulations do not allow for a second connection other than for commercial purposes. So if a residential property wanted a second meter for it, we would explain to them they probably should look in a keep track meter for themselves to be able to determine how much the other unit was using to help them with billing, but they do not purchase a separate meter for the second dwelling.
And, before I go on, I just would like to say, how much I appreciate Jenny for the input that she provided into this presentation. Let's just say I probably would have embarrassed myself without her input. Yeah, and not to say that won't happen, but
Regarding that, so I have reviewed, sometimes I've thought about adding an ADU at my property too. So looking at and working with the El Dorado County Housing that has been promoting people to get ADUs to help with the housing shortage per El Dorado County. Their equivalent is we are short of housing for all types. One of the things it does say when you want to apply for an ADU, and do we work closely with the county on this? Because there's a checklist, and it doesn't really talk a lot about meters, and it doesn't talk about the utilities as much, but it's very broad. And so I'm kind of thinking that somewhere in, have we talked to them about it? Okay.
yeah, we do, and our development services staff do work closely with the county building permit staff. When an application is made for a building permit, the county notifies the district when the district approvals will be required for a water or wastewater connection. So we do, and we have been in contact with them about this issue quite extensively, as I understand it. Okay, so getting back to the district's practices, we do not charge a separate connection. We don't require a separate connection. We don't charge a separate capacity charge when a detached ADU is constructed. We do, however, change the rate classification from single-family residential to multifamily residential when a detached ADU is added. Okay, we do this because we treat it in order to comply with the requirements of Prop 218. Remember how I described that Prop 218 requires that the costs to be proportionately distributed based on the cost to serve. Okay. Now, when I talked about how we calculate the cost to serve, recall that I said we take the overall costs associated with our providing the service, and then we apportion those to each customer class based on the methodologies that are described in more detail in our cost of services study. What we do not do is we do not say, well, gee, how many times did we go to this particular house this year? Or how many calls did we field from this particular customer? And then multiply that times this, a rate of our employee. That's not how we calculate. That would be impossible, frankly, to calculate our costs for each customer on that basis. So instead, we take the overall costs and then apportion them to customer classes and the number of customers within those classes, customers or dwelling units, as I'll talk about in more detail. So we make that change to comply with Prop 218 so that the fees associated with providing that service are not exceeded. Yeah, I see there's.
I think it's important to note it's a zero-sum game. When we go through the process and we develop the operating budget and we develop our capital expenditure plan, and then we apportion those costs to the various customer classes. If one customer class pays less, that means the other customer classes are paying more to make up the difference.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep, thank you for that, for pointing that out. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about what's the impact of this practice. So generally speaking here, for a water customer, when the district changes that customer from a single-family residential to a multifamily residential, there's a fixed cost. Recall that the methodology associated with collecting rates and charges, it breaks apart our costs into those that are fixed and those that are variable. Okay, and we recover 50% of our net revenue requirement from each of those categories. So in the case of a water customer, the fixed portion of their bill typically increases about $3.66 bi-monthly. And the variable cost is difficult to determine, but it changes from a three-tiered increasing block structure to a single tiered rate, which is slightly less than the second tier. And I'll show that in a chart on what exactly that is in just a moment. For wastewater customers, the fixed cost increases about $12, a little more than $12 every other month, and there's no change at all to the variable cost. So if you go to the next slide, you see a sort of visual depiction of this, or a table here that has each of the costs broken out. The base charge for a single, so on the left-hand column are the costs associated with single-family residential service for water and wastewater. And on the right column, you see the costs associated with multifamily residential service. So in going from single-family residential to multifamily for water, there's a slightly more than $3 increase on the base charge every other month. And then the usage charges are as they're shown. Instead of the increasing block tiers on the left, it's a single volumetric charge on the right. Now, depending on the usage, if it's a high user, then switching from single-family residential to multifamily residential probably benefits the customer. They probably pay less, again, if they're a high water user, because the variable charge is capped there, even though there's a slight increase in the base charge. For wastewater customers, the base charge goes from a single dwelling charge of $68, a little more than $68, to a base charge of a little more than $40 per dwelling unit, and we charge for 2 dwelling units when we make that change. So it goes from a base charge of $68 to a base charge of approximately $80. As I said on the previous slide, that's about a little more than a $12 increase every other month. The reason we do this, we charge double for the dwelling units on the base charge for wastewater, is that the methodology in the cost of services study for wastewater, it takes the revenue requirement associated with providing the wastewater service, and then and then half of that revenue requirement, which is recovered through the base charge, it apportions that sum to each of the dwelling units served to our customers. Okay, so it's by the number of dwelling units. So for example, a duplex served by one single metered connection would pay for 2 dwelling units. So it's the base charge times 2. Okay, that's why when we make the change from single family to multifamily residential for a customer who adds a dwelling unit, an independent living dwelling unit, we make that switch, and it results in the increase that I've shown here. Okay. Last slide. The change that I've described here is to be consistent with the cost of services methodology, which the board has adopted for apportioning its costs. The changing from a customer classification from single-family residential when a detached ADU is added is to comply with the cost of service methodology and ultimately Prop 218. If the district wants to reconsider, does a detached dwelling unit actually constitute a separate dwelling unit, the district is free to analyze that. And I would encourage you to take a closer look at that when the district does its next cost of services study, as opposed to making changes at this point, which might result in an outcome which is inconsistent with the methodology adopted in the cost of services study. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, President Dwyer, and if there are questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Thank you. Good explanation of a complicated subject, so thank you very much. Thank you for providing that input and the context. Again, it's not easy. The cost of service study is intense, as we've witnessed a couple of times. And the capital improvement plan is also always a challenge. I'd like to remind people we have $70 million worth of essential projects that are delayed because we just don't have the capacity to do it. And that affects our mission, actually. So thanks for the presentation. Any board comments on?
Just a quick question. Are we seeing a lot of ADUs being implemented?
I am informed that we are not seeing many, and that it's on the order of about a dozen a year.
How many?
About a dozen a year, mostly in water-only customers.
That would mean more rural people that are on septic systems and. Yes.
So I guess, have we contacted the county to, because I know there's a lot of them, they're in limbo and waiting for, so I've heard, but I don't know. I would think, to anticipate maybe on every 6 months, what have you got in the hopper for us? Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, that's more revenue for us.
I'm not sure what you mean by contact the county, but
They're the ones who authorize the permits.
right, and they notify us when.
Okay.
So for every detached ADU in which, the district needs to assess whether or not to provide a separate connection,
Okay.
they notify us and we evaluate that and then provide them.
Okay, so you answered the question. All right, thanks.
Any other board comments? Sir.
Not a board member, but as the GM, I would suggest we consider the number of ADUs if you want to have a specific analyzation of ADUs in the next cost of service study. If there's only 12 or 20, the number really doesn't justify that level of specificity going forward. But you won't have to worry about that until 2028.
Yeah.
You won't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Well, I believe for the reasons Brian outlined, that accessory dwelling units are going to be expanding. We're going to see more and more of them in the county. And so we just need to keep that in our to-do box and say, okay, how many accessory dwelling units do we have? What's the future look like for us? What's the trend? And then incorporate that in our future cost of service study if it's warranted. Okay, any other board comments? Is there any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 13, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. I know we had somebody that was specifically wanting to attend on this item, and I don't believe that he was able to attend, but I just want to, because of his interest, I just want to kind of go over the directions. If you're interested in making a comment to the board and you're participating through the computer, just hover to the bottom of your screen, and it should have a raise hand button, and you can click on that. It will notify on this side, and I can, I'll give you the opportunity to speak. If you're participating by phone, you can do *9 on your phone, and it will raise your hand on this side, and it'll give you, then I'll give you the opportunity to speak. Well, with that, President Dwyer does not appear. There are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 13, no action required.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Brian. You did a good job, I guess, covering the issue. We'll move on to action items now. Action item number 14.
All right. Good morning, Board. I'm Daniel Goldman. I'm Senior Civil Engineer here with the district. I'm going to be speaking to you about the Reservoir 4 and 7 tank recoating projects, specifically the construction contract and project funding phase here. So very briefly, summary of previous board actions here. Early 2023, an overview regarding the condition of district tanks was given to the board. Later that year in October, a design contract was awarded for tank rehabilitation design for Bridlewood Reservoir 4 and Reservoir 7A. Moving into 2024, another update was given to the board regarding those same 3 tanks, and a design amendment was also approved to continue that design work. And then most recently, October 2024, the 2025 to 29 capital improvement plan was adopted, which included the Reservoir 4, 7A, and 7B tank projects specifically. So a summary of issues here. Bridlewood Reservoir 4 and Reservoir 7A tanks have been identified as the next in line for coating and repairs. The Bridlewood tank, I do want to note here, was separated from this scope of work due to an extended design and permitting schedule. That's because we do need to implement a potable to recycled water supplement to take that tank offline and continue to supply the recycled water customers with the water that they need. So we're not going to be addressing Bridlewood further in this presentation. Looking at our other issues with 7 and 4, we will be replacing roofs at 7 and 4 due to corrosion. And then we have some inlet piping modifications as well at Reservoir 7, which we'll get into a bit later. So some background here, 32 welded steel tanks within the district system, so that includes drinking, recycled, and wastewater. These tanks do have a 75 to 100-year life expectancy. However, to reach that life expectancy, they do require recoating, so reapplying that coating material that's protecting the metal about every 15 years as far as district practice goes. And again, Reservoir 4, 7A, and 7B are the tanks in question for this presentation. All right, so we'll walk through a couple of photos here to give you a bit of a visual background. On the left, these are both Reservoir 4 here on this first slide. On the left, we have the interior upper section, so we're looking at the roof inside Reservoir 4. You can see some areas where the coating has failed. You can see bare metal, the dark areas, on both the roof panels and on some of the structural components that are holding up that roof. Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel, did Patrick will you his knife that he always used as the indicator? And
He did not, but I'll have to ask about that.
yeah, I think you should get it.
All right. Sounds good. So yeah, then moving over to the right here, we have the outside of Reservoir 4. This is kind of a close-up of a welded steel joint where those panels come together. And you can see there's some corrosion starting to work on that welded joint, and then the paint itself is fading and showing signs of deterioration. And then moving over to Reservoir 7. Both of these photos are from 7A. On the left, we're looking at the roof, the interior roof of 7A. You can see a near complete failure of that internal coating system protecting that roof material and the rafters supporting it as well. And on the outside of the tank, we're starting to see signs of that coating going, both at the joints and on the panels, and corrosion mechanisms are starting to work on that metal as well.
We said we try to do them every 15 years. Do you know the last time 7A was coated?
7A, I haven't been around very long, but I don't believe 7A has been done yet.
Not in this century.
No, 7B was done about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And that's, we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's why 7B interior is not on this list.
Thanks.
Yep. So a quick just reference slide here on where these tanks are located. We have Reservoir 4 up the top there. That's just up the road here from headquarters at Mosquito. And then Reservoir 7A and B, those are a pair of dual tanks to the south through Diamond Springs. So I'm going to walk through kind of a more detailed scope of work here so that everybody can understand what's proposed at each different tank location. So we'll start with Reservoir 4, replacement of the existing metal roof with an aluminum dome. That is because of the advanced corrosion that we're seeing. Don't feel that roof has any life left in it. There have been some concerns with past aluminum dome installations regarding glare and reflective light off of those domes. We are going to be requiring a matte finish be applied to those domes. That'll be done through a mechanical etching process before the domes come out to the site. So we will be mitigating those glare issues through that mechanical etching matte finish process. We'll also be adding a staircase and a guardrail at Reservoir 4. That will allow our operations and maintenance staff easier and safer access to the top of that tank rather than the existing ladder system. Full recoat of the tank interior and exterior, and then a new cathodic protection system as well. The current system on all of these tanks, as far as cathodic protection goes, is the original system, and it's run the course of its useful life. Reservoir 7A. Similar story, but a few minor differences here. The aluminum dome roof replacement remains the same, with that matte finish comment still applying here. There will be a modified staircase and connection platform due to the changes we're making to the 7A roof. 7B is accessed through the main staircase for 7A, so there's a platform ladder, not a ladder, a platform that goes across, kind of a bridge, so that will need to be modified. We also have some inlet piping modifications on the schedule for 7A and 7B. That's to eliminate the current hydraulic grade line issues that we see due to those tanks being bottom fill. We're going to restore those to a top fill style tank and try to eliminate some of those issues. Full recoat interior and exterior, as well as that cathodic protection system. And then finally, 7B, same inlet piping modifications I described at A. Recoating of the tank exterior only. As we mentioned, 7B's interior is about 10 years ago it was recoated, and we did perform a pretty in-depth inspection on all these tanks, and that interior looks good, so we're going to forego that for now. And then same story with the cathodic protection system. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So request for qualifications and bid. We issued a request for qualifications in early 2024. 3 contractors were identified as qualified through that process. We sent out a request for bid early this year to those same 3 contractors, and we did receive bids from all 3 on February 11th. We'll jump to the next slide here. So here's a summary of those construction bids. We have FD Thomas at just under $6 million, Euro Style Management at 6.7, and then FAR Construction at 7.2. As the table shows us here, FD Thomas was the lowest responsible bid. And just for reference, our $6 million bid from FD Thomas was about $1.4 million below the engineering estimate provided by Verdantis, who was the designer for the project. This slide, I want to talk about the different components of the bid that FD Thomas provided and the scope of the construction. So on the left, we have scope category. We have recoating, structural repairs, and piping modifications. Structural repairs, that's everything associated with the replacement of the roof at Reservoir 4 and Reservoir 7A. So what that means is the aluminum dome itself, all the design submittals associated with that, structural work to the side of the tanks to install those new domes, everything that goes along with that. The recoating is kind of the standard, what we would do every 15 years. So that's what that portion of the cost is. I want to note that that structural repair portion here is 38% of the construction cost. And what I'm trying to highlight here and draw your attention to is the importance of performing these coating events every 15 years and not deferring them. Because if we can stay on our 15-year schedule with all these tanks, we have a lot higher chance of avoiding these costs like we're seeing here for these structural repairs and these roof replacements. All right. So moving forward with some of the other contracting items here, we have construction management and inspection. This request for proposal went out in late 2024, and this proposal included construction management, coating inspection, and welding inspection, all professional services there. We did receive 3 proposals from Consor, MCK, and ICM Group, as you can see up on the screen. Quite glaring that ICM was lower than the competitors there, about half the cost. We are comfortable with ICM, with selecting them. We did review their proposal. We have previous experience with them. So just wanted to make that point, that we did look at that and we're comfortable with that. All right, construction engineering services. As I briefly mentioned, Verdantis is the engineer of record here. So they'll be expected to provide engineering services during construction. That would include submittal review, request for information support for us to respond to those from the contractor, as well as change order assistance. Okay, well, we'll scratch that one. And this is a sole sourced contract request here, of course, because they are the engineer of record, but just over $230,000 there for Verdantis. All right, environmental review, quick note here, just that this project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, just a Class 1 exemption. This is maintenance and repair to an existing facility. Okay, so starting to wrap things up here, summary of cost and funding. We have our construction costs with FD Thomas there at just under $6 million. Construction management and inspection with ICM at $385,000. Construction engineering services with Verdantis at $231,000. And then we have capitalized labor at $260,000, along with a 10% project contingency of $661,000 for total funding requirement of $7.5 million, just over 7.5. Comparing that to the notes at the bottom of the screen there with our 2025 to 2029 capital improvement plan, planned funding numbers, you can see the summation there between Reservoir 4 and 7A. We did bid these together, so just kind of adding those numbers up was about $8.5 million. So we are about $1 million shy of that, thankfully, here to complete this scope of work. So that brings me to board options. So option number 1, award contracts in the not to exceed amounts of $5,992,679 to FD Thomas Incorporated for construction, $385,639 to Infrared Construction Management Group Incorporated for construction management and inspection services, and $231,969 to Verdantis Incorporated for construction engineering services, and authorized project funding of $260,000 for capitalized labor and $661,000 for contingency, for a total funding request of $7,531,287 for the Reservoir 4 and Reservoir 7 tanks recoating project, project numbers 23039.01 and 23040.01.
Thank you. Good presentation. It's a need. We're playing catch up with keeping these tanks in operation and providing good quality water. So, board comments?
Actually, we need a first and a second. They could ask
Sorry,
questions,
an
but
action item, isn't it?
yes.
Move on.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Now, any other board comments, discussion?
So, sitting in the board meetings these years, I was somewhat disappointed how much we'd allowed those tanks to deteriorate. And with the new scaffolding and, are we able to take a look in there on a regular basis, more so to basically catch this before it gets to that level?
Yeah, so it is part of our current planning process to kind of come up with a routine inspection program for these tanks and make sure that we're keeping an eye on things to try to avoid, like we were saying, getting to the point where we have to rip the roofs off and replace them.
Just a question regarding this. I noticed further in the earlier slides, when we went out for qualifications, it was a long, after they go through the qualifications till you get to the request for PERT or RFP, right, whatever it is, the bid. That was 7 months from qualification. Is that normal? Because a lot of things could happen, especially at this moment, between 7 months of qualifying and then getting a request for bid.
Yeah. I mean, we've looked at that in the past. So there's some RFQs, requests for qualifications, like the flumes and the tanks, where we'll do kind of a multi-project RFQ, just because it is such a limited pool of contractors that we want to make sure we're not asking the same 3 contractors in Northern California to redo those qualifications over and over. So say if this were, say, a pipeline project, we might have that timeline a little bit closer together. But in terms of flumes and tanks, we feel more confident having one RFQ for, like, say, 3 different projects within a 3-year time span, just to try to reduce those administrative efforts on the contractor's time.
Yeah, I guess my question is, my concern, and there's so much volatility here regarding finding qualified bidders who come up this area. And if there's changeover of management, changeover of their own standards, that's 8 months between qualifications and the request for bid. So I've just kind of thought, I know that those standards are typical, but I'm just wondering if maybe we need to be more it more intense on making sure we go out for the bids earlier. It seemed like we knew this project was coming, but it took about 8 months to do the request for bid.
Before we go on, I just want to make the statement for the record, that is Liz Carrington, our, not operations manager, our engineering manager.
Just to defend Liz a little bit, I got your back. We had a significant turnover in some of the engineering staff over the last 6 months or so, and that was probably one of the causes for that. Normally, you wouldn't want to see that span.
Any other board comments? Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 14, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 14, option 1, moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. We're ready to move on to action item 15. The paving contract.
Good morning, Board. Bill Pedersen, Drinking Water Operations Manager for the district. I'm here to present, as soon as I have my PowerPoint up on the screen, asphalt patch paving contract award. So I guess I'll be doing this from the monitor on the side here. Next slide. So previous board action, 3 years ago, board awarded a contract to Joe Vicini, not to exceed the amount of just over $1.3 million. Also authorized the general manager to extend the contract for up to 2 additional single-year periods. Also added additional funding for patch paving. All of this had to do with our water service line replacement project at a request of just over $4.7 million. Most recently, the board authorized project funding in the amount of $769,000 for capitalized labor. Also, part of this was the $317,000 for the actual asphalt patch paving as it relates to the service line replacement project, capital improvement plan. Next slide. So summary of issues, as you know, whenever EID has to do work in county right-of-way or roadways regarding repairs of our assets, water, wastewater, recycled lines, anything underground in roadways, requires asphalt patch paving. Some of those are products like asphalt, slurry. Others are services, grinding, saw cutting, or whatnot. This contract will provide services for the next 1 to 3 years. Next slide. So some background. As I discussed, the district awarded a contract to Joe Vicini. The board authorized the general manager to extend the contract up to 2 additional years. Contract was extended, and it expires actually today. Patch paving is a significant cost for our underground repairs. You can see where our square footage has been trending the last 3 years. This is expected to trend down just a little bit because we've kind of shrunk down our service line replacement project. Off to the right, we have a sectional cutaway of what a typical trench looks like in a roadway. Due to our Department of Transportation encroachment permit, there's a couple different requirements. This requirement's based off of speedway of the roadway. So anything under 35 miles per hour, we're actually required to grind down and replace the hot mix asphalt up to 2 feet from the edge of the trench. For roadways over 35 miles per hour, we may have to go as much as 10 foot beyond the trench line there. The district's also required to replace the asphalt along with the cold patch that the district utilizes for the temporary repair. We also have to remove up to 12 inches beyond each side of the trenchway. Next slide. So this is just an example of what the crew typically does. We excavate the concrete as whatever we need to do to facilitate the repair. Next slide. And once the crew's completed their work, we'll use cold asphalt patch to make that temporary repair. Next slide. And then, as I discussed, we're required to remove up to 12 inches, not only the cold asphalt patch, but also the existing roadway up to 12 inches all the way down. And then we'll grind down up to 2 feet or 10 foot, depending on that roadway. Next slide. And this is just an example of completed work in the roadway section. Next slide. And then here's another example of extending that amount of asphalt that we've had to replace. So our bidding process, the district requests bids on our website. We also put an ad out in Mountain Democrat to try to spur other competition. We did that in December 20th, 2024. The bids were due and subsequently opened on January 29th, 2025. As a result, we got 5 responsive bids. Next slide. So here's a summation of the bid results. As you can see, Doug Veerkamp General Engineering was the low bid. Interestingly enough, this is a 10% decrease in overall unit prices, predominantly in the services category, the grinding, the saw cutting, the striping, services like that. And then also, because of the CIP for the service lines, we shrunk that program down. Overall volume was reduced, and the costs kind of reflect that. Next slide. So that brings us to your options, the board options. Option 1, award a contract to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering Incorporated in the not-to-exceed amount of $1,248,504 for asphalt patch paving and associated pavement restoration work for a 1-year period, and authorize the general manager to extend the contract for 2 additional single-year periods if in the district's best interest, subject to the annual contract amount increasing by no more than 5% in each contract year.
Repaved all of their roads for them. We do a good job.
Well, based off our service leaks, we're on that trajectory.
Probably already resurfaced half of my block.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Option 1.
Option 1.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 15, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 15. Option 1, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Mansfield. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll now adjourn to closed session item A. Council, do you have a time estimate for us? Not to exceed 5 minutes.
Thank you, President Dwyer. Yes, we will be meeting in closed session to discuss the matter that is described under the agenda item closed session A, and I anticipate that the board's consideration of this item will require at least 15 minutes.
All right. Thank you. Okay, let's go to closed session.
So for the purposes of this Zoom meeting, we will shut it down temporarily. The board will not report back prior to 11:40. However, it may be after.
We're back from closed session. Anything to report, Council?
President Dwyer, the board met with its real property negotiators to provide direction on the item that was agendized as closed session item A, but took no reportable action.
Thank you. Do we have any other board comments? Any assignments, Jennifer?
None today.
Thank you. Then we'll adjourn.
At 12:07.